Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Harm Reduction Report Christmas Special.
Ooh, Christmas special.
What is a Christmas special? Do you feel this heightened sense of like anticipation, like this is going to be meaningful when you hear that phrase, or do you feel something phony and like can't?
I can feel it. I feel the spirit of giving, the spirit of appreciation and gratitude. It's the time of the season for family and travel and getting together with loved ones and just expressing, gratitude and togetherness with everybody. Togetherness,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Cal, for the opening thought. This is Willard T. Belly, of course, and we're here with a new guest, Max McCann.
Hello.
Oh boy. Welcome, Maxwell.
Hello.
Here with your pal Cal.
Darth Max McCann.
Darth Max McCann.
Darth Max,
I did just see the Star Wars movie. It's pretty good.
It was?
Yeah.
Were you surprised or impressed? Or
There was a twist ending, which I will not spoil.
I've heard it's really good. I've heard it from a lot of people.
It seems like one thing that a lot of us do on Christmas is, or around this time is, winter break time is go to movies with our parents.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I just saw Star Wars 2 with my parents. It's like a Christmas tradition and a Thanksgiving tradition becoming now.
I agree. There's so many movies out nowadays, though. There's a wide array.
I'll have to see it. I'm like 10 years behind on Star Wars. How to get caught up.
Prequels.
So our Christmas special, to me, means I'm going to take it as a chance to be grateful. I was just telling the guys about my Halloween this year. Was really interesting because I was with new people in a new place and doing a new thing. We sat around a fire and we talked about people we knew who died and what they meant to us, and we tried to just kind of think about them and feel about them and channel them in, and it was really nice. And I wondered why we don't do this more often. And then during Thanksgiving, I always feel, you think about what you're thankful for at one point or another, right?
Mm-hmm, sure.
But also, December 5th is World Soil Day, as you all knew. And that also is a day for expressing gratitude, which somehow we defined as being different from thankfulness. I'm not sure how now, but anyway, using those kinds of thoughts, feelings, we can call it a Christmas special and sit around our version of a fire, which is just the lamp from my bedroom that I pulled into the other room for us, and talk about some of these old feelings we've had and how they've changed. Maybe kind of think of it as a Christmas past, present, and future, if we think about it that way. Things we lost, things we feel now, and dreams we have for the future, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And enjoy each other's company, and I'm going to be very grateful for that. So thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, thanks
no
for having us,
problem.
man. And a lot of this sentiment you're talking about, regarding remembrance and appreciation for people past and past experiences around Christmas time and stuff like that is a source for me of inspiration, a source of inspiration for being here today, right now, participating on this radio show and this whole harm reduction, mentality and spreading perspective. It's a great source of inspiration. One thing I wanted to share related to Christmas that has been a great source of inspiration is, I remember several years ago, maybe 8-9 years ago, in the midst of my opioid injecting days, it was Christmas Eve. It was a white, snowy Christmas Eve. My family was all together, and I was out with friends, I say friends, I mean using buddies mostly, and I was high on meth. Christmas Eve, and I stayed up all night Christmas Eve all the way through Christmas Day, and that's how I spent my Christmas. And that is kind of, now looking back on it, it's a little bit of like a tragic story. Like, what was I doing? Why was I doing that? But the reason I feel the urge to share this is because here at the Harm Reduction Report, our goal is to spread perspective and sort of help decrease the stigma that drug users and everybody in society feels. When I was high on meth, I had done it about 20 times before, but I remember wanting to tell somebody. I remember thinking like, oh, it would be so nice if I could just go, hey, Dad, I've been using meth and opioids a little bit, by the way. But you can't really say that. There's a stigma. There's a stigma associated with that. So, it came up earlier in our discussion, like.
Yeah, and look at this Christmas time. You're sharing the story, on the radio.
Yeah.
for people now. And
wow.
You couldn't tell anybody before, so that's a really significant difference, it seems.
Yeah, that speaks to our mission of just kind of helping to reduce the stigma a little bit. We're here spreading perspective, talking about past experiences and remembering. Yeah. Thinking about the past and how it could have been different, or thinking about it had one thing been different, how the present would be different now because of one different thing. Like, what if you were able to talk to somebody that day? Mm-hmm.
Maybe, who knows what would have happened.
Yeah.
You might have gotten into treatment sooner, or that might have saved you some hardship, but maybe we don't know. But yeah, it seems like putting information and the knowledge and the access to stuff, putting the power in the people's hands would be best.
Yeah.
So who knows? But that's the horrible thing about the Ghost of Christmas Past, is it just shows you the same mistake that you already saw, And I don't know. Do you think that would give you some kind of insight about it when you're seeing it from a different perspective? But
yeah, it's weird. It's been really helpful for me to like reframe that negative experience. I would look back on that Christmas and tend to think like, wow, what a waste, how dumb, and this and that, and just have real negative feelings about it. And of course I do still regret it to some degree, but also at the same time I've reframed it, as I said, to inspire this moment. Here we are sitting here talking about this because of my past experiences and your past experiences. We're all here because of our past experiences, sharing in this Christmas spirit and harm reduction Christmas spirit.
yeah.
So that's been really helpful. I'm so glad that, I've reached a point now where I can share this and we can have a open dialogue about it on radio and hopefully inspire other people to feel like they can turn to somebody, or that they should turn to somebody. Or, maybe if this radio show had reached like my family or my friends, then the stigma in their minds would decrease, and then I would have been able to say, hey guys, I'm using meth. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Max, you were just talking about Arrowwood being a source for learning about these different substances. And would you say, did you know about Arrowwood?
Yeah, I did know about Arrowwood. I used Arrowwood quite a bit.
You did?
Yeah. To research. I guess it's, it's been 10 years or so it's hard to remember exactly, but
I think the best thing about it, in my opinion at least, was it had a vault of like user submitted experience, kind of, where they would write it up and people could comment on it and there could be an open dialogue. And it was in fact just an open dialogue based on the subject. And you could see out of people doing lots of things all over, kind of, you would get all the ups and positives as well as all the negatives of any substance or anything really. I think they even have alcohol on that site, I believe, as for example. But you got like a wide range of views, and it really helped to kind of educate yourself as well as to kind of like put in perspective a little bit. But I think the most helpful would be like if you could do that kind of open dialogue, just like even with your parents.
Yeah, right here in the community.
Or
your
people,
teachers,
Yeah.
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 Or like
everyone.
Even tutors to pupils or whatever, even just like anyone.
Yeah, that's kind of what we want. We want
Yeah.
like real world Eroid, essentially, where we can like share information openly.
Yes, real world Erowid is
Yeah.
like first grade.
Yeah, exactly.
We have drug and health classes growing up, and show of hands in this circle, what was your perspective on that? At the time, did it feel satisfying?
I believe when I went to school, which was during the early 2000s, it was a lot of programs that had good intentions.
Yeah.
One I remember when I was in like elementary school was DARE.
Yep.
DARE to be against drugs and peer pressure and all that kind of things. And the way they educated was almost like they showed you a lot of like kind of fear tactic almost.
Yeah.
Or like some of those early commercials about like, someone smoking a little, pot and they melt on a couch.
Yeah.
Or
Deflated
something.
balloon.
Yeah, or it shows them just being like completely like the world's worst menace to society or whatever. But then at the same time, nowadays there's like politicians or people in the government or high respected people that, say openly, I smoked a little weed back in the day or even currently.
And here they are representing people and doing good things.
Yeah, and I think it's nice because, like, man, I kind of lost where I was going from that one, honestly.
That's what we call a moond. If we
A moond, yeah.
Yes.
Where you-
From the Latin mundus, which means the universe or everything. A moond is a moment where, yes, when the sandbagger news van just flies off the cliff, when you've completely forgotten what it is you're saying, even if you were mid-sentence.
Yeah.
And actually, what seems like a moment of confusion and terror almost when you realize you can't remember what you were trying to say. This is when you're at the peak of you're about to go down. You don't know. You're off the cliff for sure, but are you going to go down into the valley or like shoot out into space? You're not sure yet. And it seems like a moment of frustration, but then you realize it's actually a gift from the Mundus just saying, don't worry about it, think about what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And use it as an opportunity, even if you think it's a disadvantage at first, to start saying something new. To just say what you want to say now without worrying about what you were just thinking.
Yeah. There's reframing it again to be something positive. There you go.
Yeah.
The moon.
I like that. It's a lot more positive vibe.
Yeah. That works. It happens.
If the ghost of Christmas present were with you, and he took you to some moment of the present happening right now, it would be a still moment. If he's really going to take you to one moment, and I like to imagine that moment would be where you haven't decided yet if it's going this way or that way. That's a good moment if you had a chance to sit and look at it. I bet you'd learn more about it if it didn't go by so fast as they usually do.
Dang, I like it.
I'm digging it.
Like Christmas goes by fast, and we're gonna have another Christmas like after this one, Jeez. What will change by then?
Surely lots.
At the same time, not a lot sometimes, in some cases at least. Especially like growing up, until you get to the point where you move on and move away from your homes. It's a lot of tradition kind of passed through.
So Max, you are a GFunker like me.
I am.
And we've experienced a number of G-Funk Christmases and winters. And we're diving into another. So how do you feel? Do you feel any major differences from earlier Christmases? Like,
I think one thing I'm feeling this year is kind of on a tangent from the harm reduction aspect.
Yeah.
It was kind of usually in the last couple Christmases I've been working, like Christmas Eve right to, or like right after Christmas. So I wasn't able to go to see my family or whatnot. And it definitely gives like a different kind of vibe completely.
When you can't see your family, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think especially one thing I had one year was it was like when I wasn't with the family in that environment, then I turned to other means of like kind of having a good time, so to speak. Whether I'm around here with some of the friends that stayed, it was definitely the bottle was a little more like family.
That's interesting you say that. We learned about a sociological theory related to that. I believe it was social bond theory. Essentially, having a good support network and having these loved ones in your life and having them present is a real healthy deterrent in self-destructive behavior. Maybe it wasn't self-destructive in your case. Maybe it was like
I would say it was probably self-destructive.
It was a little bit overdoing it.
I'll be real, yeah.
There's moderation, and then there's self-destructive overdoing it for sure.
Oh yeah, there's some pretty good Christmas punch there. So,
but the connection helps you a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Connection to people.
Yeah.
Yes, a connection to people. And what we do with drug users now is we cut them off from people at all costs.
Yeah.
If you're arrested and you serve any amount of time in jail, say for drug charge, this is on your record forever now, and you're not going to get a job almost anywhere, and you are barred from getting back in with people.
Yeah.
And it's that disconnection, I think, and the fact that you can't talk to anybody about this and you're branded as a criminal and a bad person forever by the law.
It's almost
it sticks with you.
It's almost like they prevent the recovery process completely.
Yes, exactly.
And they don't mean to. Like you were getting at, they have good intentions, but the approach is I don't know, maybe too heavy-handed, misguided. Yeah. Like
there's people, you see on the news a bunch. There's people that have assaulted women that went to prison for less time than some kids have had a couple bags of a lot, but like some weed, and they're in prison for 10, 20 years. They serve more prison time than some of these real criminals.
That's one of the lines in this new song I'm working on.
Really?
It's funny you brought that up. Yeah. It's about like rapists getting set free while good people are getting arrested for weed, and I don't know, it's a little bit backwards in my mind, to me anyways, by my perspective.
Yeah, and I mean, I could see the point they're trying to make, the dealing part of it, or the participation basically in the black market kind of activity is bad.
Yeah.
But to punish someone so much, it's one thing if you're dealing, even selling illegal weapons and stuff like that, but it's another thing if it's just a little bit of the ganj, so to speak.
Yeah, the intentions are good.
And I believe it comes from a root of just misinformed.
Yeah, having that. Yeah, like you said, being very punitive on marijuana users and drug users, and like you said, outcasting them from society, essentially forces them. And I felt this way too. When I was seeking treatment, you get kind of forced into this underworld, black market kind of situation where, talking about my meth problem, I'm not going to be able to do that with my family or my friends or anyone else unless they use meth. So it kind of creates this divisive atmosphere, two separate spheres of people. And, that's not ideal. That's not ideal for people.
Mm-mm.
Spheres of people. How can we at one time talk about medical amnesty laws? Like my friends who work at the hospital here in Grand Forks have told me, if your friend is overdosing, call us, and nobody's going to jail. We're not going to get you in trouble. We're just gonna save your friend and help you.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, in Minnesota, as in like 20 other states, there are things called drug-induced homicide laws where people are being charged with homicide after calling an ambulance to pick up then a friend who's overdosing if you were doing the drugs with them. And people, one woman, I think in Ohio, I should look it up again. The Drug Policy Alliance has some videos on this, but they explain, like, this woman with her boyfriend, another friend brought them some heroin. They did the heroin together, these two, and he was overdosing. She called an ambulance. He ended up dying, and they put her in prison for several years.
For basically saving the person.
Attempting to save
the person.
Yes, she easily could have just dumped him on the side of the road and gone home and not have been charged with anything, and made everything worse. So I mean, I guess these are spheres of thought that don't seem to go together very well.
I agree. That's just
more about
like
disconnecting people.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if there's a stigma, almost like you know, I guess everyone knows Santa's not real, but we have like this merriment. Sorry to break the news to any of our younger listeners. But I mean, it's not if he's real or not. It's like the merriment, the joy around it. There's no stigma around it. It's just it's like still joyful even when you know the true fact. People still like Christmas. So it's like, I don't know where I was going with that. To their mood though.
If we could talk about drug addiction and I don't know, do we have to believe in hope as this kind of phantom thing?
Yes.
I think we do. I think we should believe in hope.
It's as if it's Santa Claus, like kind of pretend it's really happening, but know deep down that it's really in us.
And I think the biggest benefit too for people that maybe like have recently dropped a habit or whatnot, this like finish, like if the stigma was gone, you could have this kind of end of that recovery cycle where you get reaccepted and like positive vibes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it reinforces that the decision you made was a correct decision.
It's weird.
For you at least, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's weird. Everyone, yeah, totally. That makes sense. Everyone in this day and age has a stigma attached to who they are. Like no matter what, where if you wear a pea coat versus a Ralph Lauren coat, there's like a stigma. Yeah. There's this divisive idea about every single behavior that humans have, and it's useful in some ways, but it can also be counterproductive, as in the case with seeking help and stuff like that. Getting back onto that medical amnesty or the homicide? What was that called?
Drug-induced homicide.
Yeah, the drug-induced homicide. That I forget where I was going with that. We got a mooned. Another mooned. Moonding over here.
It's a radio cast of many moons.
Moons, yes. The more the merrier.
Yeah.
This time of year, you see a lot more moon, too. Yeah. It's a lot darker.
Yeah.
I feel like there's also that part of the holidays where...
It's hard.
It's also the time of merriment and joy, but at the same time, there's that internal struggle because it's also just seasonally, less sunlight. Usually, especially seasonal depression or whatnot.
Yeah, for sure. It's a stressful time of season.
And I think it's definitely something where this is a time of year where we should, like, embrace the, idea of forgiveness and also embrace kind of the harm reduction stance of, allowing people almost to, like, come to you if they need to talk to you or something like that and just, like, not judging anyone.
Yes.
Yeah, so, like, let the season serve to trigger that in us, this forgiveness,
bring us closer together.
Yes.
Yeah, bring us closer together.
Exactly.
Together.
That makes sense.
In a time when it's really easy for people to get a lot colder
and alone and cut off from people.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Everybody gets cut off from people a little bit in winter because it's dark and it's cold and you just go home.
Yeah, you get busy and stuff.
And you go to bed.
You wake up and there's light for 10 minutes and then it's dark.
Yeah.
Dark, cold.
Yeah. Just in the midst of talking about this, I remembered one story, which, as I remember it, this occurred around Christmas time, because Christmas break, you work hard. Students are working hard, like everyone, but then they also get time off, usually, for Christmas break. And so these two very different attitudes, from studying for finals and cramming for them and taking them, to 2 or 3 weeks vacation, and you're gonna go home and sit around and do nothing probably.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah, I love it. I'm loving it so far.
It was just in the midst of one of these transition phases, probably the very night of the chill phase. We were celebrating or something, and this was after I'd gotten my wisdom teeth taken out, and Cal's story reminds me of it because this is really just the one only time I felt like I had my first experience with using opioids in like a recreational sense. It was after I got my wisdom teeth taken out. I got pills. I don't remember what they were now. Probably hydrocodone. And I had more than, I had some left over after pain was done, so I just kept them for a while. And I think this night I took some, and I think it was slightly more, or maybe a decently bit more than the recommended standard dose when I was in pain. So more than the standard dose, but it was the same amount I had been taking, more than the amount I had been taking when I was in pain, but now later without the pain, and with some alcoholic beverages that I was with friends in the fraternity, and I never mixed the two before, and obviously this is a very bad idea to mix pills and booze, or to mix any opioid with booze. I didn't know any of that, and I had a really strange moment that I can still remember pretty vividly, but weird. I was sitting in my room with a friend or two, and it was almost like a moment of psychosis or something, and I realized afterwards, whatever it was, it felt like it was triggered by the fact that I had those pills and I was also drinking. Hard to attribute it to one or the other, but it seemed like a combination was what made it happen. It was really intense and it was really uncomfortable. It was not cool. And I also remember not telling anybody about that other than the two friends in the room, with
not
me.
Feeling like you could. I mean, who can you tell that to?
Definitely was not going to mention that at Christmas at home, because, you just don't talk about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But what's crazy is I bet if I look around the room at Christmas, half the people there would have some interesting emotional story they could share that would actually mean something that if we talked about could actually get better. Something they feel they're not allowed to talk about, and none of us did.
It's all related to those stigmas.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Now both of us, and surely many other people, probably everybody, has experienced some stigma or some situation where they have an issue or a concern that they want to bring to somebody, but they don't quite feel comfortable doing so. And it's the importance of this harm reduction mentality that we're kind of trying to demonstrate here, and the point we're trying to get across is that if you can compare like drug usage and drug education in particular to something like sex education, so for example, you as a parent, you wouldn't avoid having the sex talk with your kid. You give them sex education. You try to do it as accurately as possible. You say, ideally, you abstain from sex. If you don't, there are tools that you can use, like condoms and stuff like that, to help you stay safe and, prevent adverse reactions and stuff like that. And it sounds like, you mixed alcohol with these pills, and probably just lack of knowledge. You just didn't know. You maybe had never particularly researched that type of thing or heard people talking about mixing opioids and alcohol.
Definitely. Perhaps I did hear that in either DARE in elementary school or my 10th grade health class.
Yeah.
But if I did hear it, it was sandwiched in between a lot of other statements, many of which I had learned since then are bogus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you don't, you look back on everything you learned and you say at least half of it was bogus. Probably the other half is bogus too, and you just don't know what to believe anymore.
Yeah.
The trust is gone, and you don't know really. You can't use that as a valid source of information anymore. So even if I did hear it then, perhaps my view of anything I learned was tainted by some things I had been learning.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was trying to segue back into that. Like the DARE program, I often wonder how that contributed to my addiction. Of course I made conscious choice and stuff like that, but at the same time, like you said, the credibility related to this DARE program. If you hear like marijuana, you smoke it and suddenly you're addicted to heroin. Marijuana, you smoke it and you're gonna go crazy and kill people, or your brain dies. These sort of extreme fear-mongering, scare tactic type things. And then I tried marijuana, and I realized that wasn't true. I was still getting A's in school. I was doing well. I was able to be productive and whatever. So, like you said, you sort of lose that credibility. The DARE program loses that credibility when they don't communicate the accurate information. Of course, they can encourage abstinence, but don't encourage it through lies.
Yeah, encourage it through positive, real information and experiences like reading Arrowwood,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's too bad that Arrowwood is not taught in the DARE program because, it would reach a lot of people if it were.
Yeah.
I didn't know about it, Perhaps I would have looked up before, because I had never taken those pills. I knew, I had never taken pills for fun before, and I knew it was, a new thing I was doing. And, I thought I knew what I knew about it, and I just did what I did. I had access to more information, I might have been a lot more safe. And probably not not done that, period. But yeah, apparently the information I learned from school either wasn't there or was tainted by the other communication problem that comes with the rest of the stuff they were telling us.
I would have to say, just as a slight minute counter.
Good.
At the same time, on most medication, there's listed facts, FDA or whatever, prescribed by your doctor, what not to do with it. But at the same time, you can see that on certain medications or hydros or whatever. But there's a lot of things nowadays that are pretty high supply that don't have those kind of facts on them. So even if it is presented in any way, you don't know because, especially with the stigma behind substances, is you have no idea what it is or anything like that. Versus, so it's if there maybe is less of a stigma, more information, mouth to mouth.
Mouth to mouth is important, yeah.
Yeah, vocal information that is spread. It reaches a wider audience.
Yeah, exactly. The bottle, he's getting at,
That's
shortly said no drinking.
But that's reading the fine print nowadays and agreements to Netflix or whatnot. No one usually goes through and actually reads everything, so it's kind of
a lot of information.
It's kind of taught to us at a young age now that you kind of, this is the facts, these are the small print, but all right, this is my product.
Though prescribed medications still contribute to a lot of addictions, according to research, the one good thing about them, like you say, is that they are labeled very clearly. They were made by a lab that is approved by some kind of government agency, and it's been verified that what is in the bottle they handed you really is what the label says. That is a huge advantage.
Yeah, very beneficial.
Though, it's still, a lot of people become addicted to prescribed medications, so they know how much they're supposed to take. Sometimes, one doctor I just watched a video about called it addiction by prescription. It's for certain drugs, a lot of people are have a tendency to become addicted if they take actually exactly what the doctor prescribed them. And no, so it's it's putting people at risk.
Yeah, and in the Christmas spirit, from the doctor and whatnot, you can get addicted to it, but it's opening a present that's shaped like a dog and it's a dog. Versus, once that present from that, side leaves, so to speak, and you search for the present out in public, in the underground, they might give you that present that looks like a dog, but you open it up and it's really a bunch of snakes or something, spiders or something. It looks like a dog. It looks like the same dog, but it ends up being something completely more sinister.
Oh, you pick up the Furby at the store and it turns into the gremlin.
Yeah.
What were the peaceful gremlins called before they turn into gremlins? You can't feed them after 10 o'clock or something.
You can't get them wet.
Oh.
Yeah, dude. I don't remember, though.
Yes. Jeez.
I don't remember. I haven't seen that movie for quite a while, dude.
Little gremlins.
Dude, that's a really good point. I'm thinking of another Christmas memory that I'm probably meant to share. It was my very first time doing LSD.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was in college, and it was over Christmas break, and I was visiting friends, and wow, I had the experience I had, and it was very positive. But then later, after a couple other experiences, I began to think that perhaps that first time wasn't actually LSD, or perhaps it actually wasn't at least what I had the other few times.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like suddenly I became aware of that fact that we don't know what's going on most of the time, and that must have contributed to some interesting emotional development, and reflecting on it now is more valuable to me too, because sometimes we can have some of these stories and we might even laugh, like, but we have these close calls, and sometimes the stories are really dark, a friend saying they thought they were going to die, or they're puking their guts out or something. You hear stories like that, it's like, wow. Reflecting on them now, we're very grateful. I feel very grateful to have learned everything I've learned, and to have gotten through it, and to just be who I am now, and to use these stories positively, because a lot of people we know can't look back on this. Their close call was too close.
Yeah.
And they're gone. And they don't get the chance to reflect back on anything. So we have to do that. We have to do that for them.
I agree.
And I think it's good for us too. Like, even right now, I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah, that was very deep, well said, well spoken.
It's kind of
okay, Cal.
It's kind of like a weight off your shoulders almost. I remember the first time, it was a couple years ago. I think it was either right around or right after Christmas time or so. I actually talked to my mom, and I told her about, I smoked weed a lot, honestly. But I smoked it, whatever. And it was like this whole time leading up to it, I was so nervous. And there's like that I was thinking about that whole stigma, like what might have happened. But as soon as I said it, and you realize like these people that you're so afraid of, because like the whole society has taught you to be really like afraid of that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden you're like, welcome back. And it's almost like a very merry feeling. And it's like, I don't know.
A very merry feeling. I'm thinking about Elvis Presley's I'm like a stranger in my own hometown.
Yeah.
and when you decide to not be anymore, to be open with yourself and your family and your community about who you are, and to feel the acceptance again, is a very merry feeling. Is that kind of what you were describing?
Yeah. And it's like not even just about, people that might, smoke a weed, or about anything even in general. If you're feeling anything self-destructive, whether that be thoughts that are self-destructive, or whether that be like behaviors or anything, just like the ability to realize that you can overcome it. But if the society itself kind of welcomes you to do it, all of a sudden you get this merry feeling and everything is a lot better.
People need to be free to make those expressions and to have them received. There ought not be intentional barriers put in front of those people to do that if it's going to make everybody better.
Yeah.
And there are, it seems, a lot of barriers in the way.
Sure, yeah.
So we maybe you might say, like, well, why is this my problem or the society's problem? Like, let these people figure out their own PR problem and whatever, or just work harder or something. But that seems a little unfair, I think, because there's a lot of intentional barriers in front of these people. The stigma is really built in there. And we have that responsibility to help empower those people. Go out of our way to do so, because it's been skewed for a long time.
And I think that all starts with correct, truthful information.
Yeah.
Because as soon as people start an informative dialogue, then abstract dialogue outside of the directive, people saying, oh, I don't know about this, I've done this, or it changes it from like, oh yeah, I heard from a friend, to like, you're more easily able to say, your own experiences, because people are informed on it. So, I don't know.
So we gotta spread perspective then.
Yes.
Get the most eyes looking at something. So what do you think if all of society, all of G-Funk, could be taken by the ghost of Christmas future, 50 years into our future or something, and look at how we're talking about harm reduction, what do you think we would all say that we want to see? Do you think what everyone would say is different from what you would say? I mean, if everybody could really think about it together and go to work on it together and be of the same mind of some great idea, what do you think it might include? What do you think we might see in that future?
In my, like, when I imagine an ideal situation, like you're talking about in years to come, my hope is that the whole idea and practice of harm reduction will be well integrated, and people will treat, like parents with their kids will have this open discussion about drug use and alcohol, and it will be analogous and very similar looking to the way that they talk about sexual education or any other type of harm reduction, like buckling your seatbelt. Just tell the truth. That's what I imagine for the future. That's what I hope for when it comes to harm reduction.
People telling the truth to their kids.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, an atmosphere where a kid doesn't have to be afraid to tell his truth.
Yes, yeah.
And so, if there's a better alignment of the two kind of, childhood view truth to adulthood truth, there's better alignment through positive, correct information.
So it's less that in the ideal future, we would we'd scoop up a big pile of knowledge and awareness and pour it into people's brains and give it to them and say, there you go. But actually zap their brains with lightning so as to rearrange them, as give them the ability to go with the changingness of it and not get too caught up on any one idea of how it's going to be, so that when your kid comes to you, you'll actually listen to him.
I would say, honestly, follow the scientific method more on most things, where you have steps and stages you go through of, like, you present an idea or whatever, you gather facts on the idea, you weigh the facts, and then you present your own opinion based on what you kind of already thought, but you do wide range of research. So you're not narrow it to like one source, which I think a lot of, especially younger generations, are narrowed at one source. That sometimes isn't correct. But if you widen the source and then go through that process on most ideas, make more of a rational kind of state of mind.
Spread that perspective, get more eyes looking at the thing, and you'll see it better. Alan Watts or Lawrence Watts relayed a story once that's coming to mind about 4 men approaching a mountain from 4 opposite directions, and each writes an account of his experience with the mountain, describing it, going up it, down it, and each of them was a true, valid description of the mountain, but only all together would you say you had any sense of the whole mountain.
Sure.
Maybe that's what spreading perspective would kind of look like. This mountain is pretty gnarly, and it seems wildly unexplored by us yet. If this mountain we're talking about is our problem with drugs and things we do to our body and policies we have about it. We need more people on the mountain. There's always been some, wild psychonaut segment of the population that's these dudes going up the mountain,
Yeah,
men and women, like, through history, through cultures, just going up the mountain, like, in very crazy ways that we, probably don't even know the half of.
Probably stopping at every base camp along the way for a while,
Yeah.
Till they get to certain heights.
So Arrowhead is like,
A map.
all of these people climbing this wild mountain are putting their stories here, and we're getting more eyes on the mountain all the time and learning more about it and how it changes. That's valuable information. It's probably the best map we have of the mountain so far.
Yeah, those are very credible.
Along with all the scientific research, which is probably the most valuable.
I think one of the most uninformed kind of like point of views about it is that I feel like some people think that if you have an airway or you have these maps to the mountain, that all of a sudden everyone's going to start being mountain climbers.
Oh.
But I don't think
point.
that's the truth. You know, some people who don't ever want to climb a mountain, if you present them with a map, they're still going to go, oh, I don't want to climb the mountain. And other people who are like, I want to climb the mountain, you show them the map, and then they're like, oh, maybe I don't want to climb that mountain.
Yes. When you explain to somebody, hey, you know that you ought to be testing your Molly because it might not be Molly. People hear that, and you know whether they have access to testing equipment or not. Sometimes they're like, you know what, I'm just gonna like smoke pot instead.
Yeah.
And yeah, in that sense.
And I mean, it's even that. It's like, I read an article the other day that even in Mali, there's people. It was in the Midwest. They were sneaking fentanyl into like Mali or cocaine, and it's like such a weird thought because it's like, you know, a depressant or like it's a painkiller, and they're mixing it with Molly, but like they don't have to mix much. They just, and I think their point is they want to put a little bit so that you get addicted to whatever they're giving you, because that super addictiveness. But that's relates to your point of you never know what's in anything, because you know, even if your friend's friend who gave your buddy that thing was like, don't trust me, it's great, I know what's in there, you don't know who he got it from.
Yeah.
Or so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But like, you know, I guess a good example in the Forks here is you go to Happy Harry's and you see that bottle of Captain Morgan and you know it's Captain Morgan.
Yep. It tells you exactly the percent alcohol on most of that stuff.
Yep.
For some reason, on booze, it never includes other nutrition facts. I guess
Calories or anything like that.
Yeah, sometimes calories, but yeah, usually not. And it amazes me when there isn't the alcohol content on there either. I feel like that should be a no-brainer, like a required, sensibly thing you'd have on every alcohol label. You know, the potency of it. I mean, yeah, you expect that when you go to the doctor and you get psychoactive substances, they tell you exactly the potency of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And for the most part, it seems when you go to the liquor store, yeah, you can be confident that this is what it appears to be. That's a good harm reduction strategy there. The information, the labels.
Yeah. And like I said, even if you label everything, even if all the information is present, not everyone wants to be a mountain climber. So
okay, yes, and you know when you said that about the maps to the mountain, one bad effect of this idea that we have a map of the mountain is that we don't. Even though there are a lot of people describing their experiences now and a lot more scientific data coming out of this, I think the biggest thing that comes out of all this information, especially the Irwin sources and the personal experiences, talk to people, is that we don't know everything. And what we do know is going to change again and again.
There's always another path up the mountain, up and down.
So I know, and the path is going to change.
Yep.
And that's the nature of the mountain. That's what we found out, I think. Because a lot of people who, are the real good psychonauts use the map, but ultimately don't trust it and don't trust everything they've learned. The not so good psychonauts trust the map too much, and they think that they know what to expect, they know what's going on, they've done this a certain number of times before, maybe 100 times before, whatever combination or conditions or substances you're using, and you think you know what's going to happen to you, and you get surprised big time.
I mean, I like relating things back to the home base. Here in town, you go to a bar one weekend, have some drinks, feel good, go home. Very next weekend, you go have the same drinks. For some reason, it just doesn't agree with you that day, and all of a sudden you're puking or you're blacked out, and it's like kind of strange, and it kind of throws you for a loop a little bit. Is even you had the map given to you the whole time, but even you can't trust it completely because just having anything to do with anything happening with the brain, it's a chemical thing, chemical reactions taking place that any amount of added dopamine or anything is going to throw it off, and you never really quite know how it's going to come back together to steady state, so to speak.
Yeah, it's different every day. Your physiological makeup is essentially different every day. I mean, even throughout different hours of the day, morning versus night. At night you start having the release of melatonin a couple hours before falling asleep and stuff. So your body, or the mountain, is changing. Those tectonic plates underneath are shifting a little bit, and that's going to change the map a little bit. So yeah, that's a good point.
Avalanches all the time, dude.
Dude, it's like when you're a kid, when you think about Christmas and like that kind of euphoria it produces versus when you're 20 plus, and all of a sudden you think with Christmas there's still euphoria there, but it's a lot different.
It's changed
based on just experience, and your brain chemistry's changed.
The situation has changed.
Exactly.
Yeah, I wonder where we will be thinking next year.
It's an exciting journey.
When you're climbing the mountain, you don't think about next year, You're thinking about this moment. And maybe that's what we ought to focus on.
Most of the time you're thinking about not falling off the mountain.
Yeah. Do you think the Ghost of Christmas Present is generally the most useful?
No.
No?
I would say, honestly, the most helpful
Really?
is the most helpful is the Ghost of Christmas Past.
Okay.
But the most thrilling is the Ghost of Christmas Present.
Oh.
Especially if we consider the mountain, so to speak, because the Ghost of Christmas Present is constant adrenaline and constantly filled with, oh, I don't want to fall. I really don't want to fall. And usually, eventually, sometimes you lose your footing and you'll fall down to the very bottom. And I think you gain a perspective once you get to the bottom, like you might have climbed very high. But you get to the bottom, you're safe. And I guess, I don't know, you get a perspective like, all right, I don't really want to go that high again. Whereas, I mean, if you're just climbing blindly, sometimes you reach a little too high. And I mean, even if your map isn't the correct map, if you have an idea of this map, you might know your limit. But I guess that's the last thought on the mountain. Party Mountain.
Party Mountain.
Like the episode of Sunny in Philadelphia, dude.
Party Mountain.
Yeah.
Wow, I should look into that one.
Yeah. Excuse me.
Well, we're reaching the 56-minute mark, so I was thinking we could, I guess, do a little outro or something. I also don't want to kill the conversation, so we can keep talking anyway. But why don't we do a quick outro?
We could wrap up our plans about, you wanted to mention, what the upcoming SSDP conference, and our proposal has now changed. The proposal that was accepted for this SSDP conference in Baltimore, Maryland, is involving Andrew's Law, the attorney that, was involved in the case. Lance Block will be speaking there, hopefully, and as well as Andrew's mother, Tammy, will be there speaking.
We're working on getting the money for our speakers.
Yeah, that's our current hurdle.
Yeah, it's not been confirmed yet. We got to get all the money we need, but we've got a scheme.
Yeah, we got a basic idea, and the proposal was accepted. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
So if we can make it there, we're good to present.
Yeah. I was also going to mention that Psychedelics Today is a great podcast, very informative and interesting. We've been chatting with the creators of that podcast, and we're going to try to do some things together, and they're really cool people. They were at the MAPS conference I was at. MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, is the fiscal sponsor, the 501c3 of the Psychedelic Club. It was a great conference. I met them there, and hopefully we'll be doing stuff with them. So check out Psychedelics Today if you want to hear some more good, or hear some good stuff. Other thing I was going to say, we've been talking to Michael Dulitz some more. Our dear homie Michael Dulitz, the Grand Forks Opiate Response Project Coordinator, who again has just been giving us a lot of great feedback about what we're doing, and it's been really encouraging just talking to him. And we might be doing some real cool things together. One thing that's happening is on January 9th, there's going to be a community event and a screening of a PBS documentary about opioids in North Dakota. and I'm not sure where or when, but I know it's January 9th. There's an event that the city's going to sponsor, and we'll be doing some stuff there, I think. So keep that in your mind. Other than that, catch the next episode of the Harm Reduction Report, live Tuesday morning, 7 a.m., KEQQ 88.3 FM Grand Forks, or on the UND Psychedelic Club Facebook page, or on sandbaggernews.org. And please, if anybody has any ideas to connect with us, please contact us, message us any way you can think of. Also, if anybody, especially people who are currently recovering opioid addict, we would like to talk to you on some videos we might be working with some other people on making about sharing stories. If you know anybody who would feel like sharing their story, anonymously or otherwise, please reach out to us. Is everybody feeling good about this Christmas special?
Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm feeling very merry.
Yeah? Okay, good. Good. Well, thank you, everybody. So, for the record, it's Wednesday night, December 20th, when we're actually recording this. It's not going to air until Tuesday after Christmas, but I feel like we're
bringing back the Christmas spirit.
We're bringing it up anyway for conversation,
There
which
you go.
perhaps is good. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Cal and Max, for
thanks
hanging
for
out with
having me.
too.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the listeners for tuning in, and thanks to Noah for giving us this opportunity to be on the radio and spread perspective. Your pal Cal signing off. Oh, let me just mention, remember, we neither condone nor condemn drug use. We simply appreciate the fact that it occurs, and we just aim to mitigate and spread perspective.
Definitely, dude.
Thanks a lot.
You can't remind everyone of that enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, wow. Cool, guys. Should do like a vocal little jingle to do at the end of the episode.